What is up, Guardians? Jake Parker here, and now that we are 9 years into amazing Destiny content, it's time to stir up some controversy and paint a target on my back. So today, I'm going to be ranking all 13 complete releases of the Destiny franchise from Destiny 1 Vanilla all the way to the recent release of Destiny 2's Lightfall DLC. I will also be providing an explanation on why these rankings are the way that they are and whether you disagree or agree with me. Good, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Also, just for clarity, all rankings are going to be based solely on the base DLC content and not influenced by seasons, as we will be ranking all of the seasons later in another video. And as always, if you enjoy the content of this video, I'd love for you to consider liking and subscribing, as your support is the best thing I could ever hope to achieve. This is all expansions of Destiny ranked. Coming in at number 13 is Destiny 2's first expansion, Curse of OSIRIS, where we see our Guardians rushing to Mercury in order to rescue Osiris from the clutches of the Vex, while also subverting a potentially deadly future. By featuring 8 story missions, 3 new adventures, 2 new strikes, the introduction of the new raid lair system with Eater of Worlds, 3 new Crucible maps, a new public event, the ever-advertised Infinite Forest, and topping off with a new wave of exotic weapons and armor to chase, you'd think it would sound like a goldmine of content. But behind all of that shine, a dark essence lingered, and that is the essence of imbalance and a lack of replayability. For the all-powerful Guardian that Osiris had believed to be since Destiny 1, we uncharacteristically see his development as a somewhat defenseless, fragile being in need of rescuing. Pair this with the extremely short 2-hour trek to complete the story missions and an NPC we barely talk to, Guardians can feel that Curse of Osiris felt more akin to an update than an actual DLC that's worth upwards of the $20 that was shelled out for the expansion pass. The Infinite Forest that Bungie marketed as this procedural marvel that would change how you play the game every time you entered it actually turned out to be an extremely limited corridor tied to strikes and adventures with no other objective beyond it, leaving mass amounts of players to feel disappointed as they felt they were simply lied to. The open world felt much more restrictive and smaller than prior content, with exploration largely limited to the few lost sectors surrounding the area, and the one public event directly in the center. To put it simply, once you were done with the campaign, replayability was pretty much isolated to the new raid lair and the seemingly endless hand cannon shotgun meta of Crucible. Now, despite the many caveats, there were a few positives that did shine through, such as the update to the Bright Ingram loot pool and the seasonal Halloween event in the Infinite Forest that was well received by players. Unfortunately, that was not enough to move Curse of Osiris away from number 13 on this list. Coming in at number 12 is the first DLC of the Destiny franchise, which is the Dark Below. In this DLC, we see the introduction of the infamous Eris Morn as one of Destiny's most iconic protagonists, guiding us through the Cosmodrome and the Hellmouth to stop the Hive God Crota from being resurrected. It's here that we see the birth of 2 new strikes, Destiny's second raid release with Crota's End, 3 new Crucible maps, a player level increase, and lots of new exotic weapons and armor to earn. What felt like a strong continuation of Bungie's new flagship IP inevitably held itself down by quite a few faults that frustrated a vast amount of players. With 3 story missions melded into the world that took around maybe 1 hour to complete, the Dark Below operated more as a prologue to the upcoming raid than an actual paid DLC. NPC vendors provided what felt like very limited resources and created an economy imbalance that forced players to attempt activities almost severely underleveled. On the Crucible end, balance patches were largely minimal or far in between, because balance patches at the time affected weapon use across the entire game and not just specific playlists. This meant that anything that was buffed in PvE would mistakenly become a powerhouse in Crucible. The Crota raid, however, did become a standout activity with solid difficulty and a reward to chase that excited longtime players. But beyond that and the updated Vanguard playlists where rewards would stagnate very quickly, there was ultimately little replayability across the game as a whole unless you wanted to repeat missions over and over again or wait a long time for a public event that produced little reward for no effort. Hitting the rails at number 11 is the Destiny franchise's second DLC, House of Wolves, where we see our guardians tracking and hunting Skolas and the Fallen House who betrayed the Awoken Queen. House of Wolves was a much sharper response to the feedback from Dark Below by providing 5 new story missions, a new strike, a brand new Prison of Elders co-op arena, 2 social spaces, 4 new Crucible maps, and a brand new sidearm weapon class. Pair this with a plethora of balance patches and exotic items, and you'd imagine this would have been a great making of much more replayable content. But only if you enjoy Crucible, as the majority of updates to House of Wolves rested dominantly on breathing life to the PvP playlist. The Prison of Elders provided varied activity and fun for players to enjoy with solid loot to chase. But it quickly fell after receiving the highest rewards from the Reef and essentially stonewalling any further incentive to play. The true focus of House of Wolves was what will become Destiny's greatest asset moving forward, and that was the introduction of the brand new Trials of Osiris competitive playlist. A 3v3 dogfight to the death where flawless players would see themselves to the lighthouse for the glory of unique rewards. This was an incredible breath of life for replayability for the hardcore player, and created an extremely healthy continued player base of Guardians in the PvP playlist. However, aside from the 4 new Crucible maps and Trials of Osiris, players on the PvE end would see themselves pretty much absent of content within just a couple of weeks, leading many players not interested in PvP to feel set back. Representing spot number 10 is Destiny 2's Shadowkeep expansion, where we see the return of the iconic Eris Morn, as we're called to eliminate the new nightmare threat stirring under the moon. With 4 story missions, 2 new strikes, 4 lost sectors, the Xenophage exotic quest, Altars of Sorrow co-op activity, and the new Garden of Salvation raid, Shadowkeep aimed to focus on solid storytelling to introduce us to the pyramids mentioned at the conclusion of Destiny 2's Red War campaign. Yet, despite the solid narrative and return to a nostalgic Destiny 1 location, Shadowkeep just suffered greatly with replayability all around. The 4 story missions were similar to the Curse of Osiris campaign, and they could pretty much be completed within around 2 hours, leaving pretty much nothing more than the exotic quest which could be completed alongside it. Because the new Pit of Heresy dungeon was locked behind a paywall like its predecessors, players looking to enjoy endgame content found themselves struggling to find any value. The Garden of Salvation welcomed a new aesthetic to endgame raiding, but buggy or often non-working mechanics limited the ability for players to have a genuinely positive raid experience for almost months after release. The continuous loop of bounties forcing you to repeat the same lost sectors and objectives each week dulled the gameplay loop and diluted the fun of pure exploration. However, a shining light of the Shadowkeep DLC actually came in the form of a solid focus on PvP, with the introduction of 3 new Crucible maps and the revamped return of Trials of Saint 14. Despite the continued meta shifting with each balance patch, nostalgic D1 players would line up for a chance at obtaining Ultimate Glory. For PvE players, this DLC felt like a nightmare, while PvP players had a chance to dream. Holding strong at number 9 is Destiny 2's Beyond Light, a frigid DLC set on the icy halls of Europa where we work together with Destiny 1's Varix the Loyal to thwart Aramis Kell from wielding the new Stasis Darkness subclass against humanity. What would start as a strong 10-story mission grind would inevitably turn into a stretched-out subclass tutorial where the entire aim of storytelling was set on what Stasis is and why. Even though it's bad, we're still going to wield it to use. Beyond Light also introduces the new Empire Hunt activity, which has us exploring the further reaches of Europa as we stop Aramis's lackeys from wreaking havoc. We also see the Lament exotic quest, which is arguably one of the most broken exotics still to this day. 2 new strikes, the new Deepstone Crypt raid, 3 new lost sectors, and the brand new Legend Lost Sector activity with unique Lost Sector rewards. Unfortunately, Bungie's attempt at quality of life with in-game activities eventually fell short with what felt like unanswered pleas from the community for balance and attention. The storytelling of the campaign relied so heavily on the introduction and push of Stasis that it pretty much drowned out the depth and cohesion into Destiny lore, forcing players to have to obtain lore books to keep caught up or basically suffer the absence. Once Stasis was fully obtained, there was literally zero reason to use any other subclass, as Stasis was so broken in every activity that the difficulty of the game essentially paused overnight. The The Deepstone Crypt raid was invariably a success, but immediately soured players with repetitive raid mechanics alongside discovering that the final boss was a revisited version of Taniks from Destiny 1, who has become an ultimate meme to this day. With 0 new Crucible maps, a frustrating imbalance of meta weapons, the absolute behemoth of Stasis dominating Crucible, Stasis locked entirely behind the DLC, and the continued locking of new dungeon content behind a paywall, players were left feeling exhausted that content that should have been released alongside the DLC was instead removed and greedily reintroduced. Coming in at number 8 is Destiny 2's recent Lightfall campaign, which introduces us to the long-rumored shores of Neomuna on Neptune to stop the Witness and the returned disciple Callus. Within this, we also learn about the new Strand Darkness subclass. Behind an 8-mission campaign with optional legend difficulty, we also see huge quality of life improvements with the new loadout system, world building that we've never seen before, vendor and exotic focusing, and the new Root of Nightmares raid for Guardians to test their might. It's evident that Bungie wanted to take risks and new directions, but unfortunately, despite what Bungie's solid attempt at giving players stability and replayability was, Lightfall provided anything but. The campaign's narrative direction was just unbelievably twisted and left so many holes in storytelling both during and after the campaign. Players simply felt cheated and confused. And for a good reason apparently, as it was confirmed that the remaining narrative story arc would be released in a whole new approach, behind the seasonal narratives themselves. This upset a vast amount of players for good reason, as this approach feels more like an attempt to monetize what should have already been included in the release of Lightfall in the first place. In addition, questions of endgame difficulty come into question as the new Root of Nightmares raid saw a world-first team take the crown in just a few hours, which although wasn't uncommon compared to other raid releases, it has continued to exacerbate the community's concern of catering to the casual player. PvP throughout Lightfall has continued to struggle with a slew of issues stemming from rotating playlists that lock players out of core activities, an attempt at competitive playlisting that sees players punished more than rewarded, and the whole game issue of contacting Destiny servers and increase in emergency downtimes. Pair this with a continued locking of dungeons behind seasonal paywalls, Bungie's solid attempt to provide sustainability and replayability rests solely on putting as much into the loot pool as possible and hoping the rewards are enough to simply combat the growing concerns of compensation over community. Pulling into Bungie's lucky number 7 is Destiny 2's second DLC, Warmind, where we see our Guardians return to Mars to help Anna Bray restore the memories of her past and defeat the returning Hive God Zol. With 5 story missions, 1 new strike, the new Spire of Stars raid lair, Warmind did a fantastic job of attempting to allow players the opportunity to experience activities as a community while receiving unique rewards. Although the story missions can again be completed in just a couple hours, what really stood out about the Warmind DLC was its attempt at endgame sustainability. The event on Mars saw players constantly teaming up to achieve the greatest rewards, such as the Aikilo shotgun or the submachine gun, while others attempted to obtain multiple copies of the Null shader. PvP players also did see 2 new Crucible maps alongside a nice batch of balance updates aimed at diversifying the weapon meta, so the game really had development focus on seemingly listening to the community. What really stood out the most though was the Exotic Whisper mission, which saw players scouring Io to locate and enter the Taken Anomaly in the Lost Oasis. By doing so, players would enter the time-limited exotic mission, which by completing would reap the rewards of the Whisper of the Worm exotic sniper. Not only was this activity met with critical acclaim, but the reward of the weapon and its catalyst saw massive interest for its power and difficulty in obtaining. This easily sparked the community's lifelong interest in creating new exotic missions moving forward, and LFG discords were going absolutely crazy with players wanting to help each other. It's that kind of community togetherness that brought Warmind to number 7 on this list. Owning the spot of number 6 is Destiny 2's Witch Queen DLC, which has Guardians stopping Savathun's reign of terror and discovering how she was able to wield the light against us. Between incredible narrative storytelling, the new replayable legend campaign difficulty with increased rewards, new Wellspring activity with unique rewards, new enemy faction, new glaive archetype, weapon crafting, subclass tuning, free reprise raid, and the new Vow of Disciple raid, The Witch Queen DLC was simply an incredible experience for gamers that earned critical acclaim for its attention to all facets of the game. Bungie clearly took great risks with including so much into one DLC, but they really did an amazing job of pulling it off with pretty much ease. The weapon crafting was a welcomed addition and asked by for many, though it was met with a little bit of criticism for essentially eliminating the need for pursuing world drops for any reason. The new subclass 3.0 tuning brought new life into older subclasses and made Guardians a severe force to be reckoned with. On the PvP end, despite no new maps and a vastly confusing weapon balance, players were still able to see the overhaul and return of the new Trials of Osiris from Destiny 1 that played vastly similar to its predecessor. Yet despite all of its strengths, Witch Queen did still suffer from multiple issues, such as the continued force of the paywall dungeon content and the increased fear of missing out. With the 3.0 subclass tuning and the new approach to build crafting, players immediately began noticing a sudden decrease in game difficulty as our Guardians are now too powerful with ability spam running absolutely rampant, not just in PvE, but PvP as well. It became uncommon or almost rare to see Guardians in Crucible being killed by weaponry when abilities could be spec'd to almost no cooldown at all. This created a gameplay loop issue where casual players felt trapped and hardcore players felt bored. Because of it, it didn't take long for players to exhaust the content in just a matter of weeks. Bringing us into our top 5 Destiny releases is the vanilla base game version of Destiny 2. Our Guardians lose our light at the hands of the Cabal army, forcing us to recover our light and save the last city and Traveler from utter destruction. With 17 new story missions, 4 worlds, numerous new strikes, the new adventure system, new Lost Sector system, new Leviathan raid, huge assortment of exotic weapons and armor, new subclasses, Nightfall strikes, and the new competitive PvP playlist, Guardians saw a complete overhaul and expansion to Destiny's offerings with a focus on narrative, world building, immersion, and holistic play. Destiny 2's base game lands in the top 5 as a crucial foundation for the game's future expansions and lays the framework for how we make the Destiny universe truly ours. With some of the most beautiful worlds ever built, we actually feel like our Guardian matters and plays a role in shaping how the game's future would actually develop. Of course, it's not without its drawbacks, where super long ability cooldowns, passive playstyles, rough enemy AI, and lack of meaningful rewards greatly diluted the initial impact of Destiny 2's success. Still, without it, Destiny 2's direction as it stands would never have existed. Number 4 on our list is where it all started, the Destiny 1 vanilla base game. Bungie wasted no time or expense in diving players straight into becoming a Guardian, with the opening missions seeing us being revived by our ghost and venturing into the world to fight the universe's greatest enemies. With 20 missions, 6 strikes, Vanguard and Crucible playlists, phenomenal gunplay, factions, subclasses, patrols, social spaces, and the Vault of Glass raid, Destiny would not be the game it is today without the crucial foundation of Destiny 1's amazing development. Despite a rough start where rewards felt unbalanced and the endgame needed a bit more love, the mystical feeling and vibrance of Destiny 1, especially when playing with friends, is simply unmatched. Bringing us into the top 3 is Destiny 1's final expansion, Rise of Iron, where Lord Saladin has entrusted our help in learning of the Iron Lord's past and stopping the fallen Devil Splicers from using Siva to transform themselves into an unstoppable force. With 5 deep lore story missions, a new location, new social space, a vast amount of exotic items, the famous Wrath of the Machine raid, hidden quests, revamped strikes, artifacts, crucible modes, and maps, and more, Rise of Iron perfectly concluded Destiny 1's reign with a balance of content focused on the now and the later. Endgame rewards felt incredible, in-game events felt rewarding, the community vibe was absolutely unmatched, and the clear developments from Destiny 1's initial release to now clearly showed Bungie's commitment to giving Guardians a game worthy of its namesake as we prepared for Destiny 2. Our number 2 spot is the last mentioned DLC in Destiny 2, and that is the Forsaken DLC. Forsaken is highly regarded as Destiny 2's greatest expansion, and for all of the best reasons why. Forsaken sees us taking on 10 new non-linear story missions as we avenge the death of Cade 6 at the hands of a possessed Uldren Sov. Pair that with 4 new strikes, the last new Wish raid, 2 new locations, 8 new lost sectors, a brand new Gambit mode with 4 maps, 4 new Crucible maps, and the introduction of the new seasonal content model. And to pair that with one of the best balance adjustments to weapon and abilities we have ever had, Forsaken is the shining light of all of Destiny 2. The narrative direction left everyone shocked and actually wanting revenge against Uldren and the Barons for the death of Cade's beloved character. So the redemption arc was a vastly successful approach. The sheer difficulty level of the last Wish raid was a breath of fresh air that still to this day remains one of the most elusive and jaw-dropping content to date, with a world built to complement and an expansive pool of armor and weapons that simply feel amazing to use. Replayability in Forsaken never felt more incredible, even with the new dungeons introduced behind a paywall. The new seasonal model was approached with generally positive reviews, as players saw Bungie actively approach endgame with meaning and purpose. Forsaken has been and still is to this day some of Destiny 2's greatest content. And last but not least, the single greatest content in the Destiny franchise and taking up the top spot at number 1 is Destiny 1's expansion, The Taken King. This is hands down Destiny's greatest expansion ever made, where we see Oryx blast into the universe in an attempt to avenge the death of his son Crota. And we must put a stop to his terror once and for all. The sheer amount of quality of life in The Taken King is absolutely limitless. With over 26 story missions, 4 new strikes, the new Kingsfall raid, Crucible maps, new Crucible modes, Taken enemy race, subclasses, level increases, class-specific foundries, weapon foundries, infusion, exotic pieces, blueprints, economy improvements, artifacts, double vault space, faction quests. There's literally so much more to the list, but the sheer answer is that The Taken King was undeniably Destiny's largest content release and quality of life in all of Destiny history. From the superb storytelling to replayability, there was never a dull moment to log into Destiny's Taken King and experience content. Destiny truly felt at its peak in perfection with the release of Taken King, and Guardians across the board truly experienced some of gaming's greatest moments. And there it is, Guardians, every inch of Destiny content ranked in order, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below about what you agree or disagree with, and I'd love your feedback. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, then I'd love it very much if you like and subscribe for more upcoming content. Your support is priceless, and I literally cannot thank you enough. Thank you for being the reason I get to do what I do, and until the next video, Guardians, game on.